Like every night, a paralyzed 6-month-old baby lay still in his crib. Everyone was in amazement of what transpired after his pet accomplished the unimaginable. Was there a miracle here? The baby monitor's gentle hum was the only sound in the house. 6-month-old Noah slept motionless in his crib in the nursery, which was illuminated by a dim night light. His respiration was regular, his little chest rose and fell, but his legs did not move, as they had been for months. Don't kick. No wriggling toes. There was no movement. His parents, Olivia and Ryan, had been informed by the physicians that they were powerless to help. No apparent reason or remedy was found for Noah's paralysis. Olivia was sitting on the couch outside the room, clutching the baby blanket she hadn't cleaned in weeks. It still had the perfume of Noah's infant, a remembrance of the young kid who used to reach for her with eager hands and extend his legs widely. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at Ryan, who was sitting next to her, staring at the floor with a blank expression. Olivia said, "I'm not sure how much more I can handle." She sounded almost inaudible, as if she was embarrassed to say it aloud. "I keep thinking, what if this is it? What if he never moves again?" Ryan wiped his face and let out a deep exhale. He stated, "We have to keep hoping," yet even he seemed uncertain. It was becoming more difficult to maintain hope. Milo, the golden retriever puppy, raised his head at their feet. His eyes darted between the nursery entrance and his owners as his ears pricked up. He'd always been attracted to Noah, remaining near his crib as though sensing a problem. But something was different tonight. Milo's tail was motionless and his body tight. Not only was he lying close to Noah, but he was also observing him. Olivia took note but dismissed it. She whispered, "At least he loves Noah, I just wish. I wish love was enough to fix this." However, none realized that love was about to accomplish something remarkable. The kind of stuff that would leave people stunned. Something that would permanently alter their lives. The night dragged on, thick and silent. Too tired to chat yet too agitated to sleep, Olivia and Ryan stayed on the couch. They felt the pressure of uncertainty. Every day had devolved into a routine of research, doctor visits, and seemingly ineffective prayers. Noah slept soundly in the nursery, oblivious to the suffering his parents endured. His tiny hands were curled slightly and resting close to his chest. But his legs were still as they had been for months. The golden retriever puppy, Milo, was lying next to the crib, staring at Noah with his warm brown eyes. He had been refusing to leave the baby's side for weeks. Initially, Olivia and Ryan assumed it was a simple instinct, a puppy-child link that was benign. However, Milo's actions had changed recently. He was keeping Noah company, but he was also keeping an eye on him. He seemed to be waiting for something. The waiting became something else that evening. Milo jerked to his feet, his ears perking up. He paced in little circles close to the crib, looking at the door, then at Noah, and back again. He was agitated for some reason. Something urgent had taken the place of his normally composed manner. Something that Ryan and Olivia were still unsure of. Then suddenly Milo whimpered softly and put his front paws on the side of the crib. As though attempting to attract attention, he pushed the bars with his nose before turning back to face the door. Olivia heard it in the living room. Her brow furrowed, she sat up. She turned to Ryan and said, "Did you hear that?" As he nodded, he began to get up from the couch. Yeah, it sounded like Milo. Both of them rushed in the direction of the nursery, their hearts racing, but not because of terror. Something they were yet unable to identify. They arrived at the doorway to see Milo standing on his hind legs with his snout pressed against the bars of the crib. His tail waggled ever so little as he whimpered again. Olivia, however, was more interested in Noah than in Milo's actions. Noah twitched his fingers. Olivia noticed the smallest movement, which was hardly perceptible. Her throat tightened each breath. "Ryan," she said softly as she held his arm. "Look at his hand." Ryan's eyes got bigger. Both of them froze, observing. Then it occurred once again. A little, delicate motion. As though reacting to something invisible, Noah's fingers twisted and untwisted. And Olivia experienced hope for the first time in months, something she hadn't dared to feel in a long time. However, this was just the start. Olivia's breath caught as she tightened her grip on Ryan's arm while keeping her gaze fixed on Noah's small hand. Though it was slight and hardly perceptible, the movement was genuine. Doctors repeatedly told them there was nothing they could do while they watched their kid lie motionless for months. However, his fingers moved once more, this time more deliberately and confidently, right in front of them. Like something was awakening within of him. Ryan's voice was hardly audible above a whisper as he moved closer to the cot. "Noah." His hands were shaking as he reached out. Desperate to believe, but afraid to hope. With the exception of that one slight movement, the baby's eyes stayed closed, his respiration remained steady, and his body remained motionless. As though sensing that this moment was crucial, Milo pressed his head against the crib and whimpered again. He waggled his tail slowly but steadily. He was always there. Olivia crouched next to the crib and brushed her fingers over her son's palm, wanting to feel it for herself. "Noah, baby, can you hear us?" she asked. Then it occurred once again. Olivia's hand was slightly curved by Noah's fingers. He had a slight but unmistakable touch. She turned to face Ryan, tears already forming in her eyes, and let out a quick gasp. "Did you see that?" With wide eyes and a face split between astonishment and intense emotion, Ryan nodded. Whispering, "I saw it," he swallowed hard. "I saw it." The world around them dimmed for a minute. The months of powerlessness. The evenings when you couldn't sleep. The weariness that had crept into their everyday existence. It all faded into the distance. Their son, who had been dead for so long, was moving, and that was all that mattered now. Milo's eagerness increased and he gave a little bark. His sparkling eyes never left Noah as he raised his front paws and softly pushed at the bars of the crib once more. He seemed to know that there was more to come. Then, as Ryan was ready to take out his phone to capture the scene, as Olivia was preparing to call for a doctor, Noah's whole hand raised. Slow. Unsteady. They had not seen such strength in months, though. Unable to believe what she was seeing, Olivia grabbed her mouth and let out a sob. With a short exhale, Ryan's hands gripped the crib's edge as if he needed to stabilize himself. Once more, Noah's fingers twitched. As though he somehow knew the tiny puppy had been there the entire time, he extended his hand toward Milo. Awaiting his arrival. Keeping an eye on him. Never give up on him. Then Noah's legs twitched for the first time in months. It hardly moved at all. The slightest change under the covers. However, it was genuine. It was taking place. And everything they believed to be true about their son's illness, all the doctors had informed them, every bit of despair they had been harboring for so long, was no longer relevant. Because Noah was fighting his way back against all obstacles. And Milo had been the first. Ryan lowered himself onto the crib's edge and stared at Noah's small legs. The slightest stir under the blanket had been the movement, yet it was real. In an attempt to make sense of what they were witnessing, his thoughts raced. Their son might never move again, they had been warned for months. He was alive in a manner he hadn't been in a long time, though, with his legs moving and his fingers stretching. Olivia covered her mouth with her hands and shook her head, seemingly unable to believe what her own eyes were showing her. She said, This isn't possible." In her heart, though, she wished only that it was. Unquestionably excited, Milo stood on his hind legs once more, his tail wagging rapidly. His eyes were fixed on Noah as he gave another gentle bark and pushed the crib's bars with his nose. He seemed to be aware of what was going on, as though he had been anticipating this moment the entire time. Then Noah's legs moved once again, as though in response to the puppy's whispered encouragement. Stronger this time. More positive. Olivia let out a choking sob and fell to her knees next to the crib, stroking her son's cheek. Under her fingertips, his skin felt warm, his small face looked serene, and his eyelids fluttered, as though he was just starting to awaken. Ryan's voice was raw with emotion as he raked a trembling hand through his hair. Someone needs to see this, so we need to call a doctor. Olivia, however, stayed put. She couldn't bring herself to turn away. Too afraid that this moment would go like a dream if she blinked. Not just yet, she muttered. Just let him continue, I said. A new rush of optimism crashed over them when Noah stirred once again and made a tiny noise, a whimper. He curled his fingers. He moved his legs. His eyelids then flickered open for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. Unaware of the wonder he was at the center of, his deep brown eyes gazed up at them with a drowsy innocence. Then, as though attracted by something invisible, his eyes strayed to Milo. The puppy let out the happiest little bark and waved his tail. At that moment, it occurred. Noah raised his hand and stretched for Milo. His arms had been feeble for months, and his doctors had warned that he would never be able to move again. Olivia sobbed so hard that her entire body trembled. As if to stabilize himself, Ryan rubbed his hands over his face and turned away. However, it was impossible to conceal the tears in his eyes. The dog instantly leaned into the touch, rubbing his head against the baby's hand as Noah's tiny fingers touched Milo's fur. Suddenly, a change occurred within both Olivia and Ryan. They weren't drowning in powerlessness for the first time in months. The dread of what they may lose did not hold them back. They felt something different for the first time. They were hopeful. As Olivia saw her son's little fingers tuck into Milo's fur, tears fell down her cheeks. She had prayed for the puppy's coat to feel warm against his skin and for Noah to cling on despite his weakness. She had a dream about it, but never ventured to think it would occur. With erratic breathing, Ryan knelt next to her. He hesitated for a second, not wanting to hope too much, and reached for Noah's leg. However, he sensed it when his fingertips touched his son's small knee. A slight but noticeable twitch. His voice was full of emotion, and his hands were shaking as he glanced up at Olivia. Liv, he's on the go. He's moving a lot. The same curiosity and innocence they had earlier experienced were still present in Noah's beautiful brown eyes as he stared up at them. He was reaching, feeling, and fighting in addition to simply reacting to them. He was awakening. With a bark of excitement, Milo circled the crib and put his paws back on the rails. He was wagging his tail so quickly that it was a blur. He seemed to comprehend what was taking place, as though he had been anticipating this moment the entire time. Ryan wiped his face and laughed shakily. How on earth is this possible? Olivia was at a loss for words. She only knew that they had been drowning in powerlessness for months. Stuck in a world where they felt as though they had no control over their son's future. They had held on to hope, but it had seemed unattainable. And now they were seeing anything that went against what they had been taught. She moved her fingertips over Noah's cheek as she leaned forward. She whispered, "Baby, you're so strong. You are incredibly strong." Noah cooed softly, and then his leg moved once again as though the words had a profound effect on him. This time, it was a genuine, indisputable movement rather than only a twitch. With his hands clutching the crib as if he needed to latch on to something to keep himself grounded, Ryan exhaled sharply. Then he muttered, This is a miracle." Olivia knew in her heart that it was. In the days that followed, Olivia and Ryan experienced feelings of hope, relief, and thankfulness that they hadn't felt in a long time. Noah was a little more active every morning. His muscles, which had been forgotten and mute, started to recall. His fingers tightened their hold. Under his blanket, he kicked his legs gently. He followed the voices with his gaze. Even his grins were genuine, glowing, and gummy, and they gave Olivia the nicest kind of chest pain. The physicians were taken aback. They scanned every portion of his body, examined every nerve, and conducted test after test. But it was all illogical. One neurology expert shook his head and added, "It's inexplicable. This is unlike anything I've ever seen." However, Ryan and Olivia didn't require medical justifications. The truth was already known to them. It was more than science. Luck wasn't the only factor. It was affection. A small golden retriever dog who refused to leave Noah's side was the manifestation of love. Love that had been patiently waiting for weeks next to a cot. Love that had slammed against a crib rail just in time. Even when they forgot, love served as a reminder that miracles don't often require a lot of fuss and commotion. They can occasionally develop in the most subdued, delicate ways. A single twitch. A single, gentle bark. Pressing one paw against a crib. That was all that was required. Now, Noah's days were full of giggles and small victories, including reaching, sitting up with assistance, holding a toy, and moving his head in response to Milo's bark. Every second was more than a step forward. In real time, a miracle was taking place. Olivia was enjoying the long golden rays of the sun as she rocked in the rocking chair by the nursery window one afternoon. Noah lay comfortably in her arms, breathing steadily and slowly. His plump fingers fiddled with her shirt collar. He was much stronger today than he had been a few weeks before. Milo was cuddled up next to them as usual. She slid her fingers through his silky fur and reached lower. She muttered, her voice shaking with emotion, "You saved him." Milo just nuzzled closer and groaned. Like he knew already. Olivia then realized something that will stay with her for the rest of her life. Miracles don't always appear as we anticipate. They don't always appear through medical professionals, medications, or other explanations. They can occasionally manifest as love. And occasionally, that love has a wagging tail and 4 legs. Therefore, keep this in mind if you're ever faced with an impossible situation or feeling hopeless. Continue to believe. Not in a romantic relationship? In miracles, no. Because often the greatest healing comes from the tiniest actions, the most subdued expressions of love. And occasionally, all it takes to make a huge difference is a puppy that is obstinate.